ক্যারামেলার মতো বেশ সুন্দর, কারণ ছবিও খুব ভালো হবে, নান্দনিক হতে হবে তো জিনিসগুলো। অবশ্যই ওদেরকে প্রেজেন্টেশন একটা বিরাট ব্যাপার সবকিছু। আর মানুষের প্রথম ভালো লাগাটা ওখান থেকে শুরু হয়। রাখা আছে খাওয়ার জল, হ্যাঁ ওইটা নিয়ে আসছে ভালো।
Good morning, everyone. Today we all have assembled here to celebrate the 133rd birth anniversary of Professor Prasanta Chandra Mahalanobis, the founder of Indian Statistical Institute. This program is organized jointly by the ISI Administration and ISI Workers Organization, ISIW. Every year we celebrate 29th June as Workers' Day and also as Statistics Day as declared by the Government of India. Now, before we proceed to the main event, may I request all of you to please keep your mobile phones in silent. Thank you. We will request all our dignitaries to come on the stage to inaugurate today's event by lighting the lamps.
আমরা দুটি রবীন্দ্রসঙ্গীত গাইছি। জয়
তব বিচিত্র আনন্দ হে কবি, জয় তোমার করুণা, জয় তব ভীষণ কলুষনাশন রুদ্রতা, জয় অমৃত তব তব, জয় শোক তব, জয় সান্ত্বনা, জয় তব বিচিত্র আনন্দ। পূর্ণ জাগ্রত জ্যোতি তব, জয় পূর্ণ জাগ্রত জ্যোতি তব, জয় তিমির নিবিড় নিশীথিনী ভয়দায়িনী, জয় প্রেম মধুময় মিলন তব, জয় প্রেম মধুময় মিলন তব, জয় অসহ বিচ্ছেদ বেদনা, জয় তব বিচিত্র আনন্দ হে কবি, জয় তোমার করুণা, জয় তব ভীষণ সব কলুষনাশন রুদ্রতা, জয় অমৃত তব, জয় মৃত তব, জয় শোক তব, জয় সান্ত্বনা, জয় তব বিচিত্র আনন্দ। বিপুল তরঙ্গ রে, বিপুল তরঙ্গ রে, সব গগন উদ্বেলিয়া মগন করি, অতীত অনাগত আলোকে উজ্জ্বল, জীবনে চঞ্চল একই আনন্দ তরঙ্গ, বিপুল তরঙ্গ রে, বিপুল তরঙ্গ রে, তুলিছে দিন করো চন্দ্র তারা, চমকি কম্পিছে চেতনা ধারা, তুলিছে দিন করো চন্দ্র তারা, চমকি কম্পিছে চেতনা ধারা, আকুল চঞ্চল নাচে সংসার, আকুল চঞ্চল নাচে সংসার, কুহরে হৃদয় বিহঙ্গ, বিপুল তরঙ্গ রে, বিপুল তরঙ্গ রে, সব গগন উদ্বেলিয়া মগন করি, অতীত অনাগত আলোকে জল, জীবন চঞ্চল একই আনন্দ তরঙ্গ, বিপুল তরঙ্গ রে।
Thank you all. Now, Dr. Paromita Das, Convener Reception Committee, will present the welcome address.
On behalf of the reception committee, I welcome you all to the celebration of the 133rd birth anniversary of Professor Prasanta Chandra Mahalanobis. After exactly 5 years, in 2031, ISI will mark its centenary. The Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, MOSPI, has some plans for the institute that were thrust upon us, much like a surprise birthday party, except that in the example of the birthday party, it is a pleasant surprise. Shortly after last year's birth anniversary celebrations, there was a brainstorming session held outside ISI that included eminent persons, including the then director, president of the ISI Society, chairman National Statistical Commission, vice chairman Niti Aayog, principal scientific advisor Government of India, director of IISc, and a few former directors of ISI, IIT, IIM, etc. The purpose was to revamp the governance and prepare a roadmap for the centenary of ISI. One can't help but wonder, what would the professor have thought about such an exercise? In 1931, when the idea of starting a statistical society was floated, discussions were held with Dr. Pramothonath Banerjee, who was the Minto Professor of Economics, Calcutta University, D.B. Meek, the Director General of Commercial Intelligence and Statistics, and Nikhil Ranjan Sen, the Ghosh Professor of Mathematics, Calcutta University, K.B. Madhava, the Chair of Statistical Economics, Mysore University, and opinions were invited from persons interested in statistics in different parts of India. R.N. Mukherjee was requested to serve as the first president. Sir C.V. Raman, among others, was requested to be the first vice president. Sir Brojendranath Sheel was requested to be an honorary member of the institute. In today's parlance, it may be an analog of brainstorming, and its outcome was the birth of this institute. Coming back to the present day, on 25th September 2025, less than a year from today, the draft ISI Bill 2025 was prepared and it was opened up for public consultation. Ostensibly, the draft bill had twofold purposes of, and I quote, number one, converting the institute from a society to a body corporate, and number two, upscale its governance framework to align it with peer institutes of national importance, INI, unquote. The cover document further mentions that the draft bill is to be founded upon four guiding principles: excellence, effective governance, autonomy, and accountability, suggesting somehow that these things were lacking in the present day ISI. Towing the same line, a recent article by two of the members of the fourth review committee, R.A. Mashelkar and Adil Zainul Bhai, seem to suggest that institutional excellence is a function of its governing architecture, and a body corporate structure is the key to excellence. One may point out that several premier institutes like IISc, TIFR, IMSc provide a counter-example to their narrative. Moreover, there is a healthy and stimulating academic environment at ISI which fosters excellence, and there are examples abound to demonstrate that for anyone who cares to see. The most recent one being a breakthrough in theoretical computer science, resolving a 5-decade-old open problem on deterministic parallel algorithms for the classical bipartite matching problem. And regarding the role of ISI in nation building and the premise that rigorous statistical thinking could make India a better governed country, it is the current dispensation that needs to have a better reputation regarding data. The handling of statistical bodies and their inferences have been dismal. In 2015, the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation shifted the GDP base year from 2004-2005 to 2011-12, due to which the yearly GDP growth got inflated by at least 2.5 percentage points, according to none other than Arvind Subramanian, the former Chief Economic Advisor. Another instance is the suppression of Periodic Labour Force Survey, PLFS, of 2017-18, with leaked figures indicating India's unemployment rate had hit a 45-year high. The delay prompted multiple officials, including P.C. Mohanan, acting chairman, to resign from the National Statistical Commission in protest against undue government interference. In 2019, the government arbitrarily merged the NSSO and CSO to form the National Statistical Office, that is the NSO. This thoughtless merger, which curtailed the authority of NSC, further eroded the faith in data collection. For almost 3 years, the country has had no chief statistician. India's mainstream media remained silent on these serious issues, but the world and the International Monetary Fund was always taking note. Going back to another criticism raised by the article, that division heads are chosen by internal elections which tend to reward popularity over academic leadership, one needs to realize that heading a division is a service to the institute where only the ones capable of academic leadership are nominated by peers before they go for an election in case there is more than one nomination. There has been no contentious issue regarding election of the professors in charge in recent time. However, if the draft ISI bill is implemented and the council downsized, there would be no representation of the different scientific divisions in the council. Should we still think that the bill is supposed to usher in academic excellence? The article also highlights the gap in student intake compared with the IITs in absolute numbers, while conveniently ignoring the fact that in ISI, the increase in intake has been fourfold in the last 20 years, from around 150 in 2006 to around 600 now. It also disregards the scope, space, and budget of the IITs as compared to ISI. The apologists for the draft bill say that charging fees to generate revenue is enabling, not mandatory. For whom is it enabling? Certainly not for the poor meritorious student who would not be able to afford education without a stipend. Mahalanobis emphasized that no poor student should be left out from the study of statistics for want of money. Almost a century later, with severe economic disparity still afflicting the country, the powers that be want to change that paradigm. Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, in his last speech to the Constituent Assembly in late 1949, warned that India was about to enter a life of contradictions, where there will be equality in politics, but inequality in social and economic life. Planning emerged as a language through which Indian aspirations were expressed and was meant to resolve what Ambedkar had called a life of contradictions by providing Indians with parity in their political and economic freedoms. A decade earlier, in February 1938, Subhash Chandra Bose, in his capacity as the Congress president in Haripura, spoke of the need for a planning commission that would begin a comprehensive scheme of industrial development under state ownerships and state control. Nehru was offered the chairmanship of the National Planning Committee formed by Bose. Its brief was to prepare a series of studies of the various sectors of the Indian economy to provide blueprint for the task of planning. However, Nehru was confronted with the absence of accurate data and statistics. Independent India quickly mounted a national statistical infrastructure, and in 1949, PCM was made the honorary statistical advisor to the cabinet to make recommendations on measures to adopt statistics nationally. In the same year, India began measuring national income, a forerunner of GDP. On the last day of 1950, within days of India pronouncing herself a republic, the president introduced the Planning Commission to the parliament. Such was the urgency and impetus given to the statistical sciences in the newly independent, number-hungry nation state. ISI needs to look up to none other than Mahalanobis for ideas fostering excellence. He believed in the principle of brain irrigation as opposed to brain drain, which meant bringing in pioneers from around the world to enrich the various disciplines of ISI. I will mention two such people who joined ISI, became entwined in its history and made enormous contributions. First was the British scientist J.B.S. Haldane, who worked in the fields of physiology, genetics, evolutionary biology, and mathematics. With innovative use of statistics in biology, he was one of the founders of Neo-Darwinism. Renouncing his British citizenship, he became an Indian citizen in 1961 and worked at the Indian Statistical Institute until his death in 1964. The other was Dr. Pamela Robinson, who who was a paleontologist of rare ability with a comprehensive grasp of geology. Her particular interest had been devoted to the land-living vertebrates, the ancient amphibians and reptiles of early Mesozoic age, of crucial importance to our modern interpretation of Earth history through a span of several 100 million years. Dr. Robinson organized a program for the Geological Studies Unit based upon the theme of research on Indian Gondwana rocks and fossils. The implications were far-reaching, bearing upon the history of all the southern continents, which it is once thought as the great supercontinent of Gondwana land. Mahalanobis, with his scientific foresight, was quick to realize that this was a revolution in geological thought, almost comparable in scale to Darwinism in the field of biology. Rabindranath Tagore used to say that India is a riverine land. Nothing survives in this climate for too long. In a country that assimilated Buddha and Rabindranath himself without a trace, it is not unexpected that the legacy of an intellectual giant like PCM will fade. However, if his institute is to remain relevant and survive the threat that it faces today, it can do so only by following in his footsteps. If the nodal ministry is serious about reforming governance at ISI, it should open a dialogue and invite ideas from all the stakeholders, rather than shoving an unplanned, poorly drafted bill down the throat of an institute founded by a person who became the icon of planning in India. If the intent is indeed betterment, ISI would definitely hail the change that it deserves. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, Professor Bishwabruta Pradhan, Dean of Studies, Indian Statistical Institute, will address the audience.
Thank you. Good morning, distinguished guests, Professor Shankar Chaudhary. Then we have the chief guest and Professor Dipankar Dasgupta, special guest. We have our President, Professor Shankar Kumar Pal, Director, Professor Amar Kumar Datta, other dignitaries, faculties, students, and research scholars, and of course, the workers, which is the common term actually in Indian Statistical Institute. There is only one professor, Professor Prasanta Chandra Mahalanobis, and we are the workers. It's really a great pleasure, this celebration. This is the 133rd birth anniversary. And every year, of course, we celebrate that specifically the works of Professor Prasanta Chandra Mahalanobis. That celebration, I think, in that way it lacks. Particularly, I will talk about that Mahalanobis distance, which is widely used, but in that way, actually in ISI, I should say that we must celebrate it. How it will be done through maybe conference or how it will be done, we can see that. I will talk about some works. Again, this is basically growth of Indian Statistical Institute, which I have collected from this biographical memoirs of Prasanta Chandra Mahalanobis by C.R. Rao, that was published in that biographical memoirs of this FRS. You see, ISI was founded in 1931. I'm just chronologically, not all these works actually I would be able to mention here. So ISI was founded in 1931. The SWANKA, the Indian Journal of Statistics, which was started in 1931. The new technique of estimating acreage and yield of crops in a large region by random sampling was worked out and applied on the jute crop in the province of Bengal in 1937. First Indian Statistical Conference was held in 1938. You see, that's just after 7 years when ISI was established. Postgraduate studies in statistics for the first time at CU in 1941. Then it comes Central Statistical Organization, NSS, Indian Statistical Service, and the different units, divisions of Indian Statistical Institute came up. In this, I would like to particularly mention about that Statistical Quality Control and Operations Research Division, which was established in 1953. That is considering the need for the industry actually to provide consultancy services. And filling that need, these different units were started across the country, I mean in different cities. And this planning unit that was expanded actually in Delhi and Kolkata. So, I mean, that's several basically that with the objective of widening the activities. I will read something what that's basically about in that actually memoir what C.R. Rao wrote. The late Sir Ronald Fisher, who held many views in the common with the professor on statistical education and research, referred to the Institute's activities on the following terms during one of his visits to India. So this is about that R.A. Fisher, what he told actually, quote, every time I see the Institute, it is bigger and I hope better. On this visit, I am sure I have not seen it all. It certainly shows no sign of narrowness or standardization. New facets are always appearing. There is something more actually. So about the activities of Indian Statistical Institute. So what we want actually, we would like to see that Indian Statistical Institute does not shrink. It should widen its activities like that banyan tree. So, and you see in that way actually if we see we have different divisions, units with specific objectives, activities are going on. So we do not want that ISI should shrink actually. And this, as far as these students and I mean these academic programs are considered, so actually we over that time we have introduced new programs. I think in 2024, a new undergraduate program was instituted, that is that Bachelor of Statistical Data Science program, which is relevant in today. So that is now that it will be third year actually. So so that program is running. So every time we are actually widening. So that should continue, and you know that obviously when we enlarge this, extend the activities, we need infrastructure. So it was our long-standing actually would say requirement of new this what I should say academic building basically that to accommodate this large number of students. So a new academic building has come up, although it is half done, I would say it's not really fully ready for taking classes, but we are trying our best to make it ready. But interestingly, it's so happened that in Indian Statistical Institute, when it comes about this academic programs and the things, it is the responsibility of Dean of Studies, everything to make the classroom ready also. So anyway, that's we have to do it, but we are doing, and hopefully that classes will start there in that new academic building from this 20th July. That's the new academic session will start. So hoping for the best actually, once again I would like to mention that we will expand actually, no thinking. Thank you all. That's
Thank you, sir. Now, Dr. Partho Prati Mohanto, President ISIW, will address the audience.
So, today we are celebrating the 133rd birth anniversary of Professor Mahalanobis, and on behalf of ISIW, I welcome all you to this auspicious occasion. The ISIW is an unique organization that has its members, all workers and faculty of ISI. At ISI, we pride ourselves to call everyone from lowest staff to senior most faculty a worker at ISI. Aptly, today is also called the Workers' Day. PCM registered ISI as a learned society in 1931. Today, it is close to centenary. In recognition of ISI Society's contribution, the Indian Parliament enacted the 1959 Act, ISI Act, declaring ISI to be an institute of national importance. ISI is actually a society registered under the West Bengal Societies Registration Act. Few Indian institutions have shaped the nation's intellectual identity as profoundly as ISI. Today, ISI stands at a critical juncture. A bill has been drafted, Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, Government of India. The bill seeks the change of the status of ISI from PCM established registered society to a body corporate. It's tragic that ISI society is being abolished when it is close to celebrating its centenary. This is being done align ISI with the IIT model, as if that is the only successful academic governance model in India. There are very good institutions in India. They do not function as statutory body corporate like ISC, TIFR, IMSC, etc. ISC successfully operates as a charitable trust rather than a statutory body corporate. ISI grew out of Bengal Renaissance. It was an era defined by fearless questioning of orthodoxy and confidence in India's ability to contribute to world science. PCM embodied the spirit of Bengal Renaissance. He was associated with other luminaries of Bengal Renaissance like Rabindranath Tagore, Bajendranath Sil, Satyendranath Bose. In effect, it was Tagore who introduced PCM to the Jawaharlal Nehru. Thus, started relationship that shaped modern India and its 5-year plans. So ISI showed how newly independent nation emerging from colonial subjugation could build scholarship of global standard. To endure its autonomy now is to reject very Renaissance spirit that gave birth on it. So what about the draft bill? Let us look at the draft bill now. Mostly stated 4 reasons to justify the bill. First one, some recommendations made in the report of the 4th Review Committee of ISI, upskilling peer INIs like IIT IIM, 4 guiding principles: autonomy, excellence, effective governance, and accountability. And finally, brainstorming meeting on July 5, 2025. This meeting has no agenda minutes suggesting the exchange. And surprisingly, RTI queries reveal that Mosby has no information held in that meeting. So another thing that Dr. R. M. Asalkar, the chairman, and Adil Jainul Bhai, a member of the 4th Review Committee of ISI, have wrote an article in the Indian Express on June 17, 2026 to support the act change. They argued for council size downsizing, abolishing ISI society, administrative and financial autonomy to the regional centers, and for expanding the mandate formally to include AI and allied disciplines. Now I am giving counters to these points, right? Let us discuss the issues one by one. One of the terms of reference of the 4th Review Committee in 2021 was to examine ISI Act 1959 and its Memorandum of Association. the fourth review committee, chaired by Dr. Maselkar, recommended only 2 amendments to the 1959 Act and did not suggest the repeal the existing Act. Secondly, let us look aligning ISI with IIT-IIM model. Objectives of IITs and IIMs and ISIs are different. IITs are governed by the 1961 Institutes of Technology Act, and what was amended from time to time and never repealed ensure continuity. The IIM Act 2017 took close to 5 years to conceptualize. In this case, ISI, most of the statutory bodies of ISI expressed reservation about the draft ISI. So most of the problem in this bill from the visionless perspective of fitting ISI into a IIM-IIT model. ISI has a long legacy of research, close to 100 years, and teaching for 65 years. If you ask an institute to fit the shoes of other institute, there will be major problems. MOSFI also disregards the fact that if ISC can perform well as a trust, so can ISI as a society. Thirdly, let us focus on council downsizing. This is also interesting. ISI governed by 33-member council, successive review committee have proposed council downsizing, but ISI values collective wisdom. There was no reduction in council size. The third review committee recommended downsizing the council to 23 by dropping the government representative, while the fourth review committee recommended downsizing council to 19. And the draft ISI bill suggested BOG of 11 members. Thus, it can be seen that there is a difference of opinions of size of the council. So the institute can surely start discussion on council downsizing with a high-powered committee formed by the director. So we are ready to start the discussion. Fourthly, did the fourth review committee chaired by Dr. Maselkar suggest the abolition of ISI society? No. Interestingly, the fourth review committee recommended to elected members from the ISI society to the council. This preserved the electoral process of the society's institutional role. There is no report suggests that ISI society structure has a hindrance ISI excellence. Moreover, the ISI society has rejected draft ISI bill 2025 and requested MOSFI for discussion. That was not happened till date. We want to highlight another important fact about the ISI society. MOSFI and Maselkar and his team have argued that the ISI society structure does not allow major reforms. However, the first major reform of ISI governance structure following the recommendation of ISI first review committee was carried out under the same society structure and the same act. The reform was made possible through active cooperation between administrative ministry in one side and chairman and secretary of the institute and another side. The leadership of C.D. Deshmukh, Professor Mahalanobis and Professor C. R. Rao played a crucial role. No governance structure can remain perfect for all the times. However, any changes should be introduced to a discussion and negotiation. With the leadership of compassionate chairman and the director, along with a supportive and understanding administrative ministry, a balanced and lasting solution can be achieved. The society structure can act as facilitator in this process. Let us discuss the autonomy of the centers. We stand for the academic and financial autonomy of the centers. If ISI demands autonomy for itself, how can it deny for the center? The autonomy can be achieved through appropriate amendments of the regulations and bylaws. There is no need to repeal the ISI Act. Dr. Maselkar and Dr. Adil Jainul Bhai lament that ISI's governance structure stops it from being the forefront of AI and ML research. We feel that changing governance structure does not altered the research activities. In effect, the bill becomes a reality, and churning that will happen in the institute. To rewrite and adopt the new rules will take up productive energy of the director and faculty. This will harm the research activities at ISI in the near future. The National Strategy for AI in 2018 culminating in the Indian AI mission in 2024, starting with the research in pattern recognition. In the 1960s, ISI research encompassed the development to this field to its current day avatar. ISI had a subcomputing center from 2005 onwards and started a center for artificial intelligence and machine learning (IML) in 2021. All publication metrics will tell us ISI remains at the forefront of AI and ML research. In India, Maselkar and Jainul have opined that ISI mandate should formally include AI and allied discipline. A simple amendment can do that was in the 1995 amendment of ISI Act. No repeal of the present act is needed. As everyone talks of the progress of AI and ML, let us look what is doing to jobs. Between 2000 and 2018, India's technology industry routinely created between 250,000 to 350,000 jobs annually. By contrast, for 2025-26, NASSCOM projected only 135,000 new hires, reflecting a sharp slowdown in employment growth. As the country faces huge unemployment, we want to highlight that ISI also has huge vacancy in its staff roles. To talk about such issue, Regulation 13 of ISI gives right to the workers through a statutory body called Joint Consultative Committee (JCC). JCC reports to the ISI Council. The scientific and non-scientific workers also send elected representatives to the Council. The draft bill does away of any representation from the workers to the BOG. On the other hand, the BOG has been given power to decide the number of posts. With many posts vacant, no worker representative in the BOG, ISI workers are afraid that above power to the BOG is your way of abolition of posts. So we are very much afraid of that. If the bill is enacted now, the focus on academics of ISI will be completely repealed. Administrative issues of rewriting rules, regulation and standing orders of the new act, and this will take a long time, maybe 3 years. To sum up, we are of the opinion that 1959 Act is versatile enough to accommodate changes through amendments. We request MOSFI to initiate dialogue with ISI under new leadership about the ISI draft. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Now, the special guest of today's event, Professor Dipankar Dasgupta, who is a retired professor and a former acting director of Indian Statistical Institute, will address the audience. Professor Dasgupta, popularly known as DDG, a retired professor from ISI, is an eminent economist and has made substantial contributions to the advancement of economic theory. He has obtained his PhD from the University of Rochester. He has published papers in well-reputed international journals like Journal of Economic Theory, Journal of Mathematical Economics, Journal of Public Economic Theory, Journal of Development Economics, and many more. He has substantially contributed in the fields of general equilibrium theory, public economic theory, growth theory, and development economics. He is an outstanding and popular teacher in economics. DDG served the institute as an acting director and taught in various international universities. Before we proceed, may I please request Professor Shankar Kumar Pal, President, Indian Statistical Institute, to felicitate Professor Dipankar Dasgupta.
ঠিক আছে, সুবিধা নেই। Thank you, Professor Datta, and thank all the workers, students, and some of my erstwhile friends like Partho here, Partho Majumdar, Shashi Mohan, and others, Dr. Shankar Paul. It is a pleasure to be with you today on this auspicious occasion. Since its very inception, ISI has been adorned by academic stalwarts. By comparison, I am a small person. I address this gathering, therefore, with all the humility in my possession. I understand that Professor K.B. Sinha, erstwhile director and a highly regarded mathematician, is addressing the ceremonies today in the Bengaluru campus. I'm not sure who is speaking in the Delhi campus, but he must be an eminent scholar also. I am not one such person, and I've arrived here with a feeling akin to trepidation. I joined the institute many years ago, so long ago, I'm afraid, that I hesitate to even admit it. There was a surprise associated with my joining, though, and I will share it with you at the very end of my reminiscence. Leaving this matter aside, it is best that I begin my story with what was otherwise the very beginning of my story at ISI. As you know, P.C. Mahalanobis was the architect of India's second five-year plan, which was 1956 to 61. When he was working on it, a wing in the topmost floor of the Planning Commission was reserved for him and his team. This was Yojana Bhavan, now renamed Niti Bhavan, located in Parliament Street or Samsad Marg, right next to the Reserve Bank of India and close to the All India Radio building. After the second plan exercise was over, the professor moved back to Kolkata to spend most of his time in this Boranagar headquarters. But he left behind him a group of talented people in what was called the planning unit of ISI Delhi Center, now renamed Economics and Planning Unit. As a result, ISI had a Delhi campus located in the 5th floor of the Planning Commission, and some of India's best-known economists were permanent employees there. They included the late Bagicha Singh Minhas, the late T.N. Srinivasan, Professor Pranab Bardhan, Professor Kirit Parikh, the late Suresh Tendulkar, and a few others. Professor Jagdish Bhagwati, too, may have been a part of the academic staff for a while. When I was still a PhD scholar in USA, I received a letter from Professor Bardhan telling me of the planning unit and asking me to join it after I finished writing my dissertation. He informed me that they had a teaching and research program here where I could participate in the area of mathematical economics. I spoke to my friends and advisors, and all of them strongly recommended that I take up the position. So, most of my earliest memories of ISI as a worker are not associated with Boranagar. my early memories surround Yojana Bhavan, where ISI had then become a bit of an insecure tenant after Bagicha Singh Minhas's truncated tryst with the Planning Commission as one of its members. ISI was not associated with 5-year plans anymore, and we were blocking up prime property, doing nothing that was immediately relevant for the government of India. Fortuitously, though, we had a plot of land allotted to us in South Delhi in the Kutab institutional area, and the present Delhi campus had begun to come up there. The administrative building and the guest house, or probably the students' hostel, was soon ready, and we moved over to the new campus sometime in the mid-70s. In the beginning, most of our offices were located in the ground floor of the guest house or students' hostel. The working guest house was still a rented building in the househouse area, adjacent rooms in the new guest house building were connected by a single washroom, and there was a way of locking your neighbor out of the washroom when you were occupying it. This used to create two kinds of problems: using the washroom for too long, thus banishing your neighbor from it, or worse, forgetting to lock your neighbor out, thereby creating embarrassment for persons entering the facility while it was being utilized by someone else. Professor Obhirup Sarkar, the well-known economist, has a funny story to relate about this matter, and he may well tell you about the details someday. A regular visitor in ISI, Delhi, then was a famous probabilist, the late K.R. Parthasarathi, who offered courses in measure theory and stochastic processes once a week. He started off lecturing in the Planning Commission itself and continued thereafter in the newly built campus. He was then a faculty member of Delhi IIT, but he joined ISI Delhi soon after. Given my interest in mathematical methods, I attended his courses, sitting face to face with a true mathematical genius. When I try to assess P.C. Mahalanobis' contribution to Indian academics, things of this nature readily come to my mind. He had been able to assemble together some of the best minds in the country and abroad to contribute to the cause of disciplines that were held together by the tools of statistics and mathematics. The ISI started off with statistics and mathematics, but other quantitative disciplines were added to its research and teaching departments over time. Among these were economics, physics, geology, and so on and so forth. As a result, ISI can be described as a truly cosmopolitan organization which is specialized in the application of quantitative methods. Or at least that is the vision of ISI I still possess. Mahalanobis' eyes were always open towards talent, not just in India, but all across the world. Consequently, anyone working in the institute found opportunities to brush shoulders with famous personalities, including field medalists and Nobel laureates. And as we all know, ISI produced the late C.R. Rao, who won the International Prize in Statistics in 2023. It is the equivalent of the Nobel Prize. This genius of a statistician was entirely home-produced in ISI, and there is little doubt that P.C. Mahalanobis created the environment necessary to bring out C.R. Rao's talent. There was, to go to the lighter side of the things, there was a global side of the story also. The professor often provided employment to people with questionable credentials. As I know from personal memory, in Delhi, a worker there was known to be a linguist. He was a specialist in the Russian language, or so we were told, who had been employed to translate Russian planning model literature for the professor. By the time I came across him, ISI was no longer associated with planning, but the gentleman was still around with no specific work assigned to him. He used to perambulate the corridors of the Planning Commission and later the South Delhi campus, doing exactly nothing other than collecting a salary at the end of the month. This man approached me once, and other newcomers as well, with the message that he had invented a universal language that could be understood and spoken by anyone in the world, irrespective of his or her mother tongue. Like everyone else, I did not understand this. I did not understand this language. His true metal was tested when the late Andrei Kolmogorov was visiting us from the Soviet Union, the then Soviet Union. During Kolmogorov's seminar, the linguist suddenly stood up and began to display his command over foreign language by asking a question. The audience assumed he was speaking Russian, but Kolmogorov, however, looked stupefied for a while and finally requested the man to speak slowly since he did not understand English that well. Whatever he had said to Kolmogorov had not sounded Russian to him. Therefore, what he had translated for Mahalanobis himself remains a mystery too. I will not mention his name for obvious reasons, but I have a piece about him in my blog site. It's called Anti-Clockwise Bhagat. If you have time to waste, you can learn more about him from that written account. This man was not the only one of his kind in ISI Delhi or Kolkata for that matter. After I was transferred to Kolkata in the late 70s, I came across many such persons languishing in some sort of disguised unemployment. I developed friendly relationships with them over time and discovered that many of them were highly accomplished people, accomplished though in the wrong discipline. One such man worked for the then National Income Research Unit and was a great classical vocalist. He would sit at his table and sing away Meghamalas on cloudy afternoons. This particular gentleman was an excellent photographer too, who developed and printed his photos by himself. Those were pre-digital days, of course, and I admit that I ended up learning a lot from him about black and white photography. My learning was aided further by books available in the ISI library itself. I'm not entirely sure who had ordered these books for the ISI library, but I can appreciate the nature of diversity ISI could boast of. Being a part of the academic community in ISI was a blessing of sorts. This manifested in many different ways during my days. One of these was the nature of curriculum most of us taught. No strict syllabus was imposed upon us, and we often taught what we liked best, whatever may be the name of the course. We had the brightest students possible, and they were ready to absorb any well thought out academic material. The result was that, at least for some of us, the boundary between teaching and research were blurred. The boundaries were blurred. What we taught gave us research ideas, and I can vouch for myself at least that most of my own published papers were born in ISI classrooms. I think other internationally famous ISI professors will have had similar experiences. The people I have in mind from economics, at least in this context, both in Kolkata and Delhi, are people like Bhaskar Datta, Arunabha Sen, Prakash Chandra, Satyaranjan Chakravarti, and many others. The freedom enjoyed in ISI brings back another story to my mind. It involves the late D.K. Bose in the Economic Research Unit where I worked myself. A bright young scholar had given a seminar in our department, and I was truly impressed by his presentation. Since there was no post concept at the time, I rushed to D.K. Bose, who was the professor in charge of Social Sciences Division at the time, and requested him to find out if this young man could be offered a position. Bose agreed with me and told me a few weeks later that he was about to be employed. However, when I asked him about the salary offered, I learned, much to my disappointment, that it was totally inadequate. The appointee was already drawing a higher salary elsewhere. I was furious and told D.K. Bose in no uncertain terms that he had done his best to lose a talented person. I think late Ashok Moitra was the director at the time, and soon after, within a week, D.K. Bose visited my office and informed me that Moitra had done the needful and the salary being offered was quite attractive. I was happy. Needless to say, what made me jump to the ceiling was Bose's offer that I myself carry the appointment letter to the appointee's dwelling. Since you think so well of him, maybe you will enjoy delivering the letter yourself. This was ISI. I was flabbergasted, but I did what I was told. The young scholar ended up joining ISI and spent his entire working life here. He is one of Kolkata's best known economists, and this incident shows how, unlike many other institutions, we were not imprisoned in a straitjacket in ISI. This was one of the most praiseworthy characteristics of the institution. ISI was always ready to conduct interdisciplinary research. This was evident especially in the collaborative work that was done by statisticians and economists. I was primarily a theorist and consequently more of an observer of such proceedings. But I have vivid memories of the nature of those works, and for example, the Reserve Bank of India approached us with a problem around 1989 or so. They were concerned about the acute shortage of currency note supply in the Indian economy to smoothly carry out regular transactions. The bank wished us to find out what would be an optimal procedure to print notes of different denominations to address the problem. The Economic Research Unit faculty held several meetings with the RBI officials and finally decided to approach the famous statistician Jayanto Ghosh, who was at that time the director also, to help them out with ideas based on statistical methods. The project was taken up and completed. With the progress of technology, especially digital technology, the problem I just described has probably lost its significance today. Even so, the story illustrates the nature of real-world issues ISI was engaged in solving. At the same time that its great mathematicians and probabilists were discussing theoretical matters like convergence of probability measures, or its mathematical economists were proving existence of equilibrium theorems in infinite dimensional spaces, or working on mechanism design problems. Mahalanobis had built a hothouse of sorts that accommodated the greatest possible variety of plants. Another memory that I have about ISI is that of the first computer I had ever seen in my young days as a student of the MA class in Calcutta University. I had chosen statistics for a special paper, and the late Nikhilesh Bhattacharya used to give us special lectures on the subject. He used to travel from ISI to Katakol here and was a visiting professor in the economics department. Nikhilesh Babu was a soft-spoken person, but quite demanding as a teacher. I have many memories of this wonderful man, both from the time when I was a student as well as from the period during which we were colleagues in ISI. As students, we had heard of the arrival of the Soviet-made computer in ISI and approached Nikhilesh Babu to arrange for us to see it with our own eyes. This was done, of course, and we lined up in the ground floor of the main building to have a first glimpse of it. I didn't understand what I was looking at, and all I remember is that it was a very large object. It almost filled the entire room. When I think of that machine and look at my smartphone today, I feel amazed by what humanity has been able to achieve over time, and especially the 20th century. My peers and I were lucky to have been born at the right time and experience the right things, it would seem. As I am getting older each day, I am being exposed to even more amazing advances in technology, artificial intelligence for one, about which Professor Mohanta had spoken just a while ago. I am being exposed to these. It is probably the latest gigantic step we are all experiencing, knowingly or otherwise. I have not consciously tried to acquaint myself with AI, but I know that I am using it almost every day when I engage in Google search. I do not know if ISI scholars are engaged now with AI research. I am told now that they are, okay, but I will not be surprised if they are. After all, the Mahalanobis spirit survives still, and one expects academicians in ISI to absorb every new bit of knowledge that is sprouting anywhere on earth. Nikhilesh Babu was a statistician turned econometrician, one of the best ISI could have boasted of. He led the econometrics group in the Economic Research Unit and produced a large number of research scholars. Professor Dipankar Kundu was one of them and is definitely one of India's top econometricians. Dipankar himself produced wonderful students. One of them was Professor Amita Majumdar, who retired not too long ago from the Economic Research Unit. Like Nicholas Babu, his students never displayed arrogance surrounding their academic achievements and helped a great deal to create an environment of friendliness in Economic Research Unit. I started out by promising to present you with a surprise at the end. I have reached the end now, and it's time that I spring the surprise. The surprise in question is that I never saw PC Mahalanobis. I came back from USA in 1972 and visited this campus before moving on to join the Delhi Planning Unit. As I walked through the main gate, I felt a pall of gloom had descended on the campus. Someone or the other told me that Mahalanobis had passed away that very day. I am a living example of a person who never even saw Mahalanobis, but who had nonetheless enjoyed the fruits of his wisdom through his working life. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, Professor Shankar Kumar Pal, President, Indian Statistical Institute, will address the audience.
Good morning to all the dignitaries on the dais, my colleagues, beloved students, and guests. Today is the birthday of our founder, Professor PC Mahalanobis. It has been celebrated since 2007 as National Statistics. Today is also the Workers' Day that we have been celebrating since I joined this institute in 1975. So it's my pleasure to be present here today as the president of this institute. Today we have with us chief guest, Professor Tombak Rai Chaudhuri, well-known physician, Vice Chancellor and Professor of Physics, Ashoka University. And also we had Professor Guest of Honor, whom you have heard now, our former colleague, Professor Dipankar Dasgupta. And I thank them for their gracious presence. Today is National Statistics. So I like to say a few things for our younger colleagues or students if they are present there. It was my pleasure to be present on that day. It was 24th of December 2006, while we were celebrating the inaugural ceremony of Platinum Jubilee celebration in Amrapali, and there the chief guest was then Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh. And then he declared the birthday of Professor P.C. Mahalanobis as the statistics to be celebrated nationally. And it was, this declaration was a long due wish from our ISI work. And in fact, his availability on that 24th day was not our actually birthday of ISI. It was actually 17th of December. But just for his availability, we had to defer this 1 week. And that's the day when this foundation stone of this building, you can see the plaque, was laid by him. And ISI took pride to confer on him honorary doctorate degree, honoris causa, not for his, because he was the Prime Minister, but just for his excellence in economic contribution. And now I'll say a few words that why PCM birthday was just selected. It's very in a simple language to just commemorate his contribution to statistics planning and national development. And for example, when I joined in institute in 1975 as a CSI research scholar to work in pattern recognition problem, we used the Mahalanobis test. And now our former speakers also say Mahalanobis. And so that is what is the main point now today's data science also. And another contribution is, as everybody knows, I'm just making a few things. India's strategy for industrialization, which was drafted in his second 5-year plan during 2005-6 to 2061. And then large-scale sample survey for greater statistical reliability in understanding Indian societal realities. And finally, and everybody knows, and we have witnessed also, founding the National Sample Survey NSO 1950 and the Central Statistical Organization CSO 51. We have seen the National Statistics NSO buildings and set up in our this campus. Now, Professor Mahalanobis had some beliefs. Let me tell you. One is he was a strong believer of interdisciplinary research. And now today's computer science activity that you see, that is one such outcome. P.C. Mahalanobis, he believed as considered as statistics as a key technology. In a layman's sense, it is the key technology for increasing the efficiency of human effort. And therefore, when you see that our computer science activity as a strong one, I can remind you that it started activity in the then Physical and Earth Sciences Division, comprising Electronics and Communication Sciences unit, what you see, Electronics unit, comprising PAMU, what you see. So this activity started back in 1970s. Since statistics is well known to build paradigm for learning and prediction, therefore it became an integral part of machine learning and uncertainty analysis, and has laid the foundation of today's AI, deep learning and data science, what you see today. However, I believe, in my opinion, the PCM's belief and contribution, it needs more exploration to benefit science and society, particularly in the era of data science. Today, 29th June, is ISI Workers. Every day is Workers' Day, but today is a special day for honoring them at ISI. Internationally, we have May Day, which is just celebrated as a Workers'. But in ISI, we enjoy both. We have the May Day as well as this 29th June. In this occasion, I have a few words and observations. First, let us honor and recognize the hard work and contributions of all ISI workers, be in headquarters or in other outlying centers in unit, that made ISI what is today. Special mention will be made of those who were involved in the formative period of the institute in 1930. You may note that the period is always crucial for any kind of creation. Let us also acknowledge and celebrate the spirit of our work, dedication, and continuous effort of the scientists that placed ISI academically at a greater height in international scenery. Let me remind that ISI is approaching the centenary years 2031. The event should be celebrated in a big manner with both scientific and societal impact, at least much bigger than the way the Platinum Jubilee celebration was made year-wise nationally during 2006 and 2007. The next 4 to 5 years are therefore very crucial for Indian Statistical Institute towards fulfilling that object, and so as the role of the director, Professor Amartya Datta, who assumed the office just 3 months back in April 2026. And in fact, I have lots of expectation from him. And I will request him today, because during Platinum Jubilee, we had national statistics. So during centenary, at least one thing which I could not do during Platinum Jubilee, they let the BT road in front of ISI be named after just Professor P.C. Mahalanobis. I tried it that time, but I could not succeed. Finally, ISI has got a new director after a long search come selection process and having two officiating directors meanwhile, and with a little hide and seek game with the council. This has been a unique case in the history of ISI. Today is Workers' Day. Given the present scenario at ISI, I would expect as the president that for any problem or issue concerning workers, be administrative or scientific, the ISI administration will put adequate time and apply wisdom to dig into the issue and find out the root cause before giving the judgment on this. No shortcut, no hurry. This way would minimize not only the possibility of unnecessary harassment caused to workers, but also would reduce the wastage of everybody's time and, more importantly, the future court cases and legal expenses. Having too many court cases does not no way speak good about administration of an academic institute. Failing to do so may mean its incompetency. In this context, one may remember, while we all love to enjoy power, digesting the power is the most challenging. And here lies the significance of leadership. With these few words, I conclude my salute to our founder, Professor P.C. Mahalanobis. I wish all you a happy Workers' Day and happy statistics. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. Now, Professor Amurtha Kumar Dotto, Director, Indian Statistical Institute, will address the audience. But before that, we will take 2 minutes to arrange the stage.
কিছু দেখো বলে আপনারা So, a warm welcome to all of you, and special thanks to our Honorable President of our Institute, Professor Shankar Pal, our Chief Guest, Professor Shomuk Rai Chaudhary, our ex-professor Dipankar Dasgupta, Dean of Studies, and several dignitaries who have gracing the occasion. So first, I was sitting next to Professor Shomuk Rai Chaudhary, and I could not feel help feeling very nostalgic. So today I have been introduced as a director. But way back in 1983, when I just passed the higher secondary and was determined
to do something which would involve basic research in mathematical sciences. I had joined ISI as a BStat student for 10 days, and I was not very aware of things, and I then joined because my plan was to do mathematics honors, and I did that in St. Xavier's, which had a very good environment, but being a part of the Calcutta University, there was a huge difference between this ISI maths and what was being done there. And I was not sort of despondent that what would happen in future. So at that time, like God sent, two seniors, one 4 years senior to me, and Shomagda, who was 3 years senior to me. I happened to get connected with them, and they cheered me up, saying that the right things which had to be said at that time, gave a lot of insights. So you can say that I'm standing there, the initial seeds, the inspiration. Shomagda was one of the persons who inspired, in spite of the fact that he was in a different subject. He was in physics from Presidency College. And even today, I am quite amazed at the kind of things he said, given his age at that time. He was just, see, today he is a very famous astrophysicist. But at that time, he was just BSc from Presidency Honors, a brilliant student, but still a BSc. But the kind of maturity and insights he had at that stage to, say the right things to a confused youngster, looking back, I find it very amazing. So I think this I find this is an occasion to express the gratitude. And Shomagda would talk about astronomy. Now, from our layman's study of astronomy, one thing we know is that we look at the stars, but what we see is actually something which happened not at the point that we are seeing it. So the sun was at a certain point, let us say 8 minutes ago, and we are seeing it now. In the case of stars, it could be several million years. What we are seeing is something which happened millions of years ago. Now, I see a parallel regarding the perception about ISI. So, ISI had, of course, a fantastic start. First as a research and work for the government, and then from the 60s when its academic program started. But at some stage there was undoubtedly a slump, which I believe was partly due to the turbulence in Calcutta. Varanagar being one of the epicenters of the turbulence, there was a certain exodus from ISI to other institutes in India or abroad. And subsequently, there have been, of course, outstanding researchers, good researchers, etc., but probably the density was not very high. Teaching program had always been very strong, teaching aspect, but other aspects were probably weaker. But at that time, this, the shadow of, Mahalanobis, C.R. Rao, or Bahadur, etc., was in the air, and ISI was, thought to be a great institute. But there was a slump, there's no doubt, then, about general work culture, etc. There was maybe a lackadaisical things, ashi jai, marsh gale maina pai, I mean, that kind of things used to be said about ISI. Now, then what happens is, then ISI, for last couple of decades, has been going upward at a very fast rate. And I am saying it, I can say it with authority, because just 2 days ago, I have completed 30 years in ISI. And if you think of my association during the students, that would be 43. So I have been seeing ISI for a long time. And
ISI now, in terms of the minimum threshold, in terms of outstanding work, it is at a stage which I feel is unprecedented. If you leave aside the period of the gods, of the founders, the pioneers, that is not something which would not be replicated. But if you look at the subsequent, we are much better off. However, when I go to Delhi and meet people, etc., the perception I see is, Shei ISI earning. So that reminds me of, the phenomenon of the stars. What we see now is something which happened early. So therefore, but experts, those who are insiders like Professor Shomak Rai Chaudhuri, they have a different picture than what the layman sees. So therefore, I would like to, highlight things. So many the speakers before me have talked about, the fantastic heritage of ISI, but there is a danger of harping on the heritage. Yes, but Shei ISI to one. Now the thing is that ISI, there are two aspects. One is the applied or translation research. So there I can mention some of the recent things. ISI scientists have worked in wireless sensor networks, and they have contributed greatly to, so for instance, cancer research, like discovering biomarkers for cancer and other diseases. Then there is a new setup called IDEAS, and one of the research which was done, funded by there, was about hospital cancer surgery work, where when a surgery is going on, at that time to the surgeon being aware of how much of operation has to be done. So that feedback using this AI and ML, it was a teamwork with doctors, of course, and their ISI scientists were involved. So there were other things like, development of coal index, mineral index, cleanliness index, estimating the amount of fake currency in circulation, discovering automatically detecting microfractures in steel during production, etc., etc. Then also there is something about the passport in Calcutta. Now it is much more smooth, and there again ISI scientists had a role in smoothening. Now, this is the applied part, but there is also another aspect of ISI which gets lost due to the name. This is also an institute of fundamental research. So we know of Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. ISI does not have the name Mahalanobis Institute of Fundamental Research, but it is an institute of fundamental research, whether it is named or not. So I would ask the science managers and bureaucrats who are writing articles on ISI, are they aware that an American Institute of Mathematics held a workshop, I think 5-6 years ago, devoted to the understanding of breakthroughs in number theory by an ISI mathematician? And last year, an ISI algebraist became the first mathematician from an Indian institute to deliver the prestigious aminoethyl lecture. And because she had to deliver the lecture, she could not attend Infosys Prize ceremony, which happened at the same time. So since there are too many accolades, she had to choose which one to attend. And incidentally, mathematicians around the age of 60s, in their 60s, are invited for the lecture, but the algebraist whom I am referring to was hardly in her 40s, early 40s. And why this honor? Because she had solved a 70-year-old fundamental problem in affine algebraic geometry. Now, about these two mathematicians, so I was, just this month itself, I had a meeting with the vice chairman of Niti Ayog, and he had been, saying that, I mean, that same spirit, what he has been fed with, সেই ISI তো আর নেই. So I had mentioned about the two mathematicians and his reaction, and he said that, but are they ISI faculty? So, I mean, all these amusing things have to be noted. Now, frankly, I have not come with a prepared speech because this month I had been too busy. There were what are called these TSC meetings where for each division, this, I mean, external experts come and evaluate the project proposals. So all these divisions happened there, and then there were promotional meetings, etc., etc. So it was very tiring. However, it was also very satisfying. So for instance, when I was in this physics meeting, so there all the, experts, they were, very impressed the kind of progress ISI has made in physics in last 2-3 years. So this was a special note of. And mathematics, statistics, nothing has to be said. These are very traditional. But even in a maths meeting, a special mention was made about the fantastic improvement in computer science, and I mean, by a computer science expert. And this was made in the StatMath meeting, that this is our department is now one of the best in the country. I'll tell you one thing about. So I'm revealing confidential things because they have to be revealed. So there was a promotion from associate professor to professor of one mathematician in geometry and analysis, and a comment that was made by a referee about his work was that I envy the colleagues who get a collaborator like him. So do you now agree that there is a truth in the statement, Shei ISI আর নেই? ISI is now much better. Now, I had sent invitations to many distinguished scientists to attend today's program, and many have come, but one of them could not. Why? Because today he has to go to Delhi to receive the Suktame National Award in Statistics for outstanding contributions toward development and improvement of statistics. And from our Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. And ironically, in their website, sometimes articles appear which says nothing is happening in statistics in ISI effectively, and people don't even see the contradiction. So, all these things are, at a bit at a higher level. I mean, about mathematics, about scientists who are somewhat senior. An assistant professor in computer science, theoretical computer science, with a team. So he is part of a team, and that also has another member who was an Inspire faculty in ISI a couple of years ago. So they resolved a nearly 5-decade-old open problem on deterministic parallel algorithms. So you would have heard of the Abel Prize laureate Lovers. So in 1979, he made a landmark of randomized parallel algorithm. This is about the Abel laureate Lovers. But then the challenge was that how to, then graduate to not randomized, but deterministic parallel algorithm. So this was a big open problem in the area. So this was about algorithm for classical bipartite matching problem. And this was at the forefront of reason. Now, this has been achieved by algebraic means. I mean, replacing that randomized things by algebraic innovations by a team which includes one assistant professor, computer science from ISI. So I suppose these examples would illustrate that সেই ISI আর নেই, the lackadaisical ISI, সেই ISI আর নেই, it is doing very well. Whether it is recognized or not, of course, recognitions will come later, like, there's the starlights, they take time to reach our eyes. Now, one thing during, so I have been here for less than 3 months, and what I have found is, what I'm touched by the, extreme cooperation from all concerned, faculty members, workers, at every level. And this is very touching, and this is again quite opposite to the impression in the outer world about ISI, particularly ISI Calcutta. And I also see hope in another direction. So nothing much has to be said about the intellectual class of people here. But I would also like to say that we need to develop in another direction in elevating our consciousness level. And from my interactions, I see great potential here that if right kind of interaction happens between people, the level rises. And in Bengal, we have a very rich sources to tap in helping ourselves to rise. We have huge writings of Sri Aurobindo, with which unfortunately people are not familiar, but we are all familiar with at least the songs of Rabindranath. But then Rabindranath has been used too much for festivities, and his messages, they get lost in the musical quality, which is very soothing. But there, what I feel is that the messages sometimes get lost in the sweetness of the music. So my suggestion is that I've picked up one particular song of Rabindranath, which could be thought of as an unofficial anthem. And you have seen that we have excellent singers in ISI. But however, still, this particular song, it's very relevant for ISI. And sometimes there are utterances of Rabindranath which would seem that it is coming from the Supreme himself. And this song I have kind of requested to play the recording, because it needs a special voice. Otherwise, it just becomes a Rabindranath singing, just a song. So in that special voice of Pankaj Mallik, this song gives the feeling of receiving vibrations, receiving vibrations of optimism from the Supreme himself. So please pay special attention to not just the music, but the lyrics. And what I've done is that along with the, this will be played as a video, that along with the song, you will also see the lyrics coming in Bengali with English translation. Thank you.
I do. হবে জয়, হবে জয়, হবে জয় রে। ওহে বীর হেনের ভয়, হবে জয়, হবে জয়। জয়ে প্রাণ চির প্রাণ জয়ী রে। আনন্দ গান জয়ে প্রাণ চির প্রাণ জয়ী রে। আনন্দ গান জয়ী প্রেম জয়ী খেম জয়ী জ্যোতির্ময় রে। ওহে বীর হনের ভয়, হবে জয়, হবে জয়, হবে জয় রে। ওহে বীর হেনের ভয়, হবে জয়, হবে জয়। আধার হবে ক্ষয়, হবে ক্ষয় রে। ওহে বীর হেনের ভয়, এ আধার হবে ক্ষয়, হবে ক্ষয় রে। ওহে বীর হেনের ভয়, ছাড়ো ঘুম মেলো চোখ, অবসাদ দূর হোক। ছাড়ো ঘুম মেলো চোখ, অবসাদ দূর হোক। আশার অরুণালোক হোক অভ্যুদয় রে। ওহে বীর হেনের ভয়, হবে জয়, হবে জয়। এ আধার হবে ক্ষয়, হবে ক্ষয় রে। ওহে বীর হেনের ভয়, এ আধার হবে ক্ষয়, হবে ক্ষয় রে। ওহে বীর হেনের ভয়, ছাড়ো ঘুম মেলো চোখ, অবসাদ দূর হোক। ছাড়ো ঘুম মেলো চোখ, অবসাদ দূর হোক। আশার অরুণালোক হোক অভ্যুদয় রে। ওহে বীর হেনের ভয়, হবে জয়, হবে জয়, হবে জয় রে। ওহে বীর হেনের ভয়, হবে জয়, হবে জয়।
Now, today's chief guest of the event, Professor Shomak Roy Choudhury, Vice Chancellor, Ashoka University, will address the audience. Professor Roy Choudhury is the Vice Chancellor of Ashoka University, where he is also a Professor of Physics. Dr. Roy Choudhury graduated from Presidency College, University of Calcutta, and went on to study physics at Trinity College, University of Oxford. Dr. Roy Choudhury worked at IUCAA Pune as an assistant professor for a few years in the 1990s, moving to the University of Birmingham, UK, where he taught at the School of Physics and Astronomy for more than a decade. He moved back to India in 2012 to help rebuild Presidency College, Kolkata into Presidency University, where he was Dean of Science and Professor and Head of Physics till he moved to Pune as the 4th Director of IUCAA, which is one of the top research institutions in astrophysics in the world. His work involves a wide range of topics in cosmology and astrophysics and has made seminal discoveries using observations at radio, optical, and X-ray frequencies from the ground and from space. He has worked on exotic stars such as black holes and neutron stars in nearby galaxies, including our own galaxy, the Milky Way. In the recent past, he has been in leading positions in several of India's mega science international projects, including the 30-meter telescope and LIGO India. He has developed innovative and machine learning algorithms for mining large astronomical datasets and recently co-chaired the committee to compile the vision document for the Government of India for the next decade of astronomy research. Now, before we proceed, may I please request Professor Amurtha Kumar Dotto, Director of the Institute, to felicitate Professor Ajud.
হবে জয় হবে
Sorry for the technical glitch. And thank you very much, everybody, for coming. I see a lot of familiar faces today, a lot of my mentors and old friends in the audience. I'm amazed to hear Professor Dipankar Dasgupta's reminiscences. Thank you, Partha, for coming. I can see, of course, Shupratik, Sarojit in the audience. Amazed to see Arun Gangopadhyay in the audience. And of course, people I've known for a very long time. Before I start talking about astronomy, I'd like to say a couple of things about, because people are talking about ISI and its early history. One person has, we've heard about Halden, we heard about Kolmogorov's visit. One person who hasn't been mentioned is Norbert Wiener. And I use Norbert Wiener's work a lot in my work. Wiener spent almost a year, 7-8 months here in 1955, during a time when Prasanta Mahalanobis was mostly in Delhi with his second plan work going on. Wiener spent, and Wiener gave many lecture courses, more than 50 lectures while he was here. And that was the time which was, of course, the beginning of cybernetics. And a lot of the original work that we call machine learning now actually originated from that time. And but the more important, very interesting reference to Wiener I had was when I attended Wiener's birth centenary in 1994 at MIT. Of course, Norbert Wiener was a professor at MIT. At a time when I was a postdoc at Harvard, Wiener's centenary was held in 94. And a lot of his colleagues and PhD students talked about Wiener. It was a fantastic 3-day conference. And one of the most important talks that I remember from that conference was by Amar Gopal Bose. Now, Bose is the person that you know about the Bose speakers. Bose speakers, Amar Gopal Bose was the son of Noni Gopal Bose, who emigrated from India in the 1920s in the Khilafat movement, settled in Philadelphia, married an American white woman, and Amar Gopal was born in Philadelphia. And he went on to do his undergraduate and PhD at MIT, in which time he started playing around with stereos and devised his famous electronic speakers and various other things while he was doing his PhD with Wiener. Now, Wiener was very conscious of the fact that Amar Gopal Bose was a Bengali, but he did not know Bengali, had not been to India, and had not experienced Bengal. And Amar Gopal Bose, in this speech, he gave a fantastic speech. Of course, I attended quite a lot of courses by him too. He was a professor also at MIT of electrical engineering. And Amar Gopal Bose talked about the fact that after Wiener went back from ISI, he told Amar Gopal Bose, as he was finishing his PhD, that he had to spend a year in Kolkata. So he got himself a Fulbright scholarship and spent a year at ISI in this campus in 1956. And he talked about that time when not only was 1956, Norbert Wiener, sitting in Cambridge, Massachusetts, has sent his student to Kolkata so that he can learn Bangla and connect with his culture. Not only was he doing that, Amar Gopal Bose, in that little speech, said that out of the blue, a young woman would appear in a sari and ask to take me to a program of Rabindra Sangeet or take me to some meal somewhere. Wiener was sending messages to Prasanta Mahalanobis, make sure this young man actually gets to meet some Bengalis. And Amar Bose actually then ended up marrying an Indian woman while he was in Kolkata and Delhi during that year of sabbatical. So amazing how Prasanta Chandra Mahalanobis not only thought of the academics, but of the lives of the academics that he worked with. Such was his amazing range. And not only did he plan these things, he had these contacts all over the world. Amazing, amazing, amazing stories. I'm sure there are many, many, many stories that would come from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And this one I thought is not talked about enough. I wrote about this in the obituary of former Bush when he died. I'm one of his great admirers. Anyway, to start off, what I wanted to talk about, Amartya told me to talk about a little bit about astronomy today. And of course, I know that I'm standing between you and lunch, so I'm going to be brief. But I wanted to talk about why I think the time has come to make sure that my subject, which is astronomy, and the work that people do here, which is various versions of statistics and machine learning, and now what is called AI, comes together. I've also talked, I'm not going to give a very technical talk today, but I'm going to just point out what is happening in astronomy now, in particularly observational astronomy where I work. I'm very aware that there are some very, very important work going on in theoretical astrophysics here at ISI, and I'm in touch with many of them, many of the people who work here. But what is happening outside in terms of the various facilities that are being built in astronomy all over the world, and in particular with Indian participation, is now generating a lot of data that requires a lot of the involvement of statistics. Astronomy is actually an observational science. As an astronomer, I would like you to pity me, because I'm an experimental scientist, but I cannot really go and touch my objects. Somebody who works in a lab with mice can go and touch the mice, or even if a mouse dies, can change the experiment. I cannot change the experiment. I cannot go and visit the objects that I study, right? And yet, all that I can study comes from what the universe throws at me, and that is various forms of light, right? And from that light, I have to figure out the universe. It's a very, very strange subject. And this is why I have to depend on data, and the data is noisy, and this is why it is a statistician science, fundamentally a statistician science. I never formally learned statistics. Like Amartya, I actually studied BStat at ISI here for a week. I have to confess. And then presidency's physics list came out, and I have to sheepishly admit that I actually went off and joined presidency to do physics. I never formally studied statistics, but I find that in my research, 90% of what I do is statistics. And this is why. And that's because of just the amazing amount of data that you have in science. This is the whole sky. These are galaxies up above a certain brightness, and you can see this is the whole sky. The whole sky, if you just look at the sheer amount of information in the sky, is 41,000 square degrees. That's your 4 pi steradians. And if you look at the resolution with which now we are observing with space telescopes, this sky is more than 10 to the 15 pixels, right? And as the resolution increases, as our depth of observation increases with bigger and bigger telescopes, this is going to only increase. So the small galaxies that I study often in a particular frame is a nanosky. In addition to that, when I study the sky through pictures, the light that I receive from a galaxy that I would capture in an imaging device, that is just one view. And as I said, all my information for astronomy comes through light, but there is light of different kinds. All across the electromagnetic spectrum, there are various different kinds of light. Light is not just the light that our eyes see. There is radio, there's ultraviolet, there's X-rays, there's infrared, different kinds of electromagnetic radiation, to which now in messengers we have gravitational radiation and neutrinos and other particles. But this is to illustrate why one needs to observe the sky in all these different kinds of light. This is the sun in the various kinds of light that we use to study our objects. And you can already see that the visual, which means the light that our eyes see, that range of wavelength, the sun is very boring. It's almost nothing there. Please don't look at the sun. But if you do in the visual range, you don't see anything. You see a couple of sunspots there, right? But as soon as you see the same thing in ultraviolet, which you cannot see with your eyes, you need different kinds of telescopes. From space, you see exactly the same things. These are the same sun taken at the same time in different wavelengths. You can see the sunspots turn into huge, violent sunstorms, right? Which tell you a lot about what's going on the surface of the sun. And so on and so forth. And higher energies in X-rays, the radio sun tells us a different story. And that is because across the electromagnetic spectrum, all these different radio, microwaves, infrared, gamma rays, X-rays, every one of the different kinds of messengers tells a different story about the same objects. And for me, an astronomer who's like a detective who appears on a scene of a murder a couple of months after the murder has happened, everything has been scrubbed, very faint clues remain, and I have to piece together the murder from these very faint clues, the very faint pieces of light that comes to me across the spectrum. And that's the big challenge of an astrophysicist, to figure out from the laws of physics they know and these various clues that come. And so that is very much like that famous poem about the blind man and the elephant. When you look at the sun in the visual, you're probably seeing the elephant's legs and you think the elephant is like a pillar. When you're looking in the ultraviolet, you're seeing the elephant's ear and you think the elephant is like a fan, the famous poem, right? So the idea is that you have to put all those information together and then figure out what's happening underneath. And this is essentially a statistician's problem. In addition to that, one of the major problems we have, and this is why astrophysics is a very, very modern science as opposed to astronomy, which is a very, very ancient science, is that most of those electromagnetic radiation that I showed you across the spectrum cannot come through the atmosphere to us. You can see this is a map of the transparency of the atmosphere, and only the visual part, the part that our eyes are sensitive to, in a wonderful coincidence, not a coincidence of course, it's evolution, actually comes through the atmosphere. If our eyes were sensitive only to ultraviolet, we would not know that the stars exist. As I often say, rattlesnakes, there are some rattlesnakes that only see in the ultraviolet, and consequently there are no rattlesnake astronomers. If our eyes were only sensitive to the infrared, we would not know that the stars exist. We can see only the light that comes through the atmosphere. And this is why an astronomer, when one astronomer has to put together all this information that comes across the spectrum, has to rely on telescopes that have to go above the atmosphere. The ultraviolet telescopes have to go above the ozone layer, 50 kilometers above. This was realized by Meghnad Shah. In fact, it was Meghnad Shah who first proposed that we need to send telescopes into space, right? In a series of lectures he gave in the US, which gave people the idea of having space telescopes much later on. And that's because Meghnad Shah was one of the first people who studied the importance of ultraviolet in stellar models, which came out of his ionization equation. Now, because an astronomer has to put all this data together from the different parts of the spectrum, and we need to send these, we need to observe these from outside the atmosphere, we need to send telescopes in space. And we could only do that from the 1970s. This is why astrophysics is a new subject. Because before this, our entire view of the universe was only in that little region of the optical window. And we had instruments that could only observe the optical world. And you can now see in the different parts of the spectrum how things look. Very, very different. Remember, this is the view that you're getting only in the last generation. Our grandfathers had no idea what galaxies looked like. Right? Because before 1970, nobody had seen ultraviolet pictures of galaxies. Before 1980, nobody had seen X-ray pictures of galaxies. We have to put all this data together. The data is phenomenal. And once you put all the data together from different parts of the spectrum and now with many other kinds of messengers, we now know that if you add everything together, the whole is much, much greater than the parts. And this pays off in many, many things that we do now. For example, we can measure distances to galaxies. These are called photometric redshifts by taking brightnesses of galaxies or stars from different parts of the spectrum, putting them together. And with gravitational waves coming in astronomy in the last few years, we can now study very violent phenomena in the universe, the merger of black holes and the merger of neutron stars, by putting together the gravitational waves along with the information that you get from light. There's been only one situation in 2017 where the merger of two neutron stars was actually observed in gravitational waves and electromagnetic waves at the same time. Only one. There will be more. People are planning this, but only from one object. We have learned so much about compact objects and neutron stars. Why is this important? Two neutron stars merging to produce a black hole sent out gravitational waves. A lot of people ask me, why is this important? Why should I know? Why should the man in the street know about it? And my answer to that is, here is why it's important. Anybody in this audience who's wearing anything that is made of gold or platinum, and a lot of you will have rings of gold, every single molecule of gold that is made in the universe is made in the collision and merger of neutron stars. All the gold that you're wearing now has come, all the atoms has come from some neutron star or the other that's merged with another neutron star, because merger of two neutron stars produces an amazing value of temperature and pressure, creates an environment in which gold and platinum can be made. Gold and platinum is not made in the center of the sun like hydrogen and oxygen and phosphorus and nitrogen. The things we are made up of are made in the centers of stars by nuclear fusion. Nuclear fusion does not make gold. Right? All the gold on the earth was made in collisions of neutron stars somewhere in the galaxy. And we have observed one of them recently in 2017. This is how things are connected at the very, 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 very cosmic level. To understand things that we use in daily life, to understand our existence, one needs to study the cosmos. And we are starting to put that data together. And in order to put that data together, there aren't enough astronomers in the world. This is why we need advanced statistics. The sheer amount of data that is being produced by telescopes is phenomenal. The Rubin telescope that is now just started observing, called the LSST, India is a partner, by the way, studies the sky and looks for things that change every night. It produces 15 terabytes of data every night, right? The SKA, the Square Kilometer Array, India is 7% member or 6% member of the Square Kilometer Array. which is being built across the southern hemisphere in South Africa and Australia, will produce a petabyte a day. There is no way humans can deal with that kind of data sitting with computers. Just storing that amount of data is going to be a huge problem, right? So astronomy is big data, and the only way one can actually get information out of that data is advanced statistics, advanced machine learning. So that's a picture of the Vera Rubin Observatory that's only started observing last year in Chile. So what is this whole thing about machine learning? What happens is that you get objects in the universe, you study their parameters, you measure their brightnesses in all these different, at all these different wavelengths, in ultraviolet, infrared, etc., etc. You can measure spectra at all these different parts of the spectrum. You can get all kinds of information, their morphology, their shape. All this becomes a hugely multivariate problem. And once you're in multivariate space, your brain cannot really visualize it, and it becomes a statistical issue, an issue of the conventional tools of machine learning. And the three things that we normally do using basic machine learning, basic tools of statistics, which are important for astronomy. I'm not going to go very technical now, but I'm going to give you a couple of examples of why this is important and why anybody, people who also do not do statistics, can get involved in such things. That's because there are not enough astronomers in the world. The basic things are to do with classification and clustering, the basic subjects of machine learning. And for astronomers, a very important part is outlier finding rare objects. Because astronomers are always looking for things that they have not encountered before. And a lot of the greatest discoveries in astronomy have come from finding something and realizing that it really doesn't conform to anything we know, right? That's a very, very common thing in machine learning. So in multivariate data sets, you have all these parameters. Here there are only 3 parameters, but I just told you a typical measurement of any object in the sky can have hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of parameters. And then each of the objects that you observe will be an object in this 10,000 parameter space, and then add the data that's coming from the Rubin telescope now, which is to do with the study of variability night after night after night, hour after hour. So you'll have time series as well. So not only do you have spectra, which is essentially fluxes at different wavelengths and energy, but also how they change with time, and the morphology and shape, and all kinds of things to do with the observing these billions and billions of objects in the sky. And you have a huge data set with all these parameters. And so you have to do classification. Now, this is a 2-dimensional classification problem, which people in start with, but think of now doing this in multi-dimensions. One of the things that I started with, I want to give you an example of how I got into this in the early 90s. I started looking at classification of galaxies. These are galaxies. These are the basic building blocks of the universe. We live in one of these galaxies, the disk galaxy, for example. And one of the things that in the early 90s we were doing was to look at, in those days we were discovering lots and lots and lots of galaxies in these galaxy surveys. The numbers were 10 to the power 5, 10 to the power 6. Now the number of galaxies that are there in the surveys are 10 to the 9, 10 to the 10. And we wanted to know how to classify them into galaxies which are nice and round, ellipticals and spirals and things like that. And this is because from the 1930s, Edwin Hubble, when he first had characterized galaxies and established that we live in galaxies, had actually tried to figure out that the shape of galaxies, the morphology of galaxies connected to their state of evolution. And to understand galaxies, one needed to understand how their morphology changes with time. Things are extremely complicated now, because the deeper the telescopes go, the more new types of galaxies you find, And the picture is not as simple as Hubble thought in the 1930s. Now you have so many parameters that you know. You can ask the question, how do you classify these galaxies? And how many classes are there? How many different kinds of classes are connected to the evolution of these galaxies, right? And then, as these are two pictures of the same thing, taken with two different telescopes, the top one is a small telescope on the Earth, the bottom one is a far, far, far deeper image. And you can see, the deeper you see, the deeper you observe something, the more features you discover. And then you understand that here, these two galaxies, you didn't even think they are connected. You can see how they interact with each other and produce these very complicated structures. There's wonderful physics that goes into these complicated structures. These are resonances in phase space. And these are a dynamicist's dream of modeling these structures that come out of the interaction of galaxies. Now, the more you know about in these individual things, the more information comes out of these images, and the more mathematical techniques you need to study these things. This is a paper we wrote in the mid-90s in Science, where we looked at, this was the first application of artificial neural networks. In those days was very fashionable in actually classifying galaxies by training them on all the experts who knew how to classify galaxies, right? 95. If you look at now, last night I asked Claude, one of the AI agents, can you give me a histogram of the papers, refereed papers in physics and astronomy that use the word machine learning in the abstract or in the keywords, right? And you can see, starting from 95, how things have exponentially moved in the last few years. And actually verified these numbers. The growth of the use of machine learning in the last few years has been exponential, partly because what I'm talking about. Just fact that the bigger telescopes that have come out in the last 10 years or so have produced so much data that there is no way humans can deal with the amount of information that's coming out. And so it's very important. One of the things that we started doing was to look at just not the morphology of galaxies, which tell you the shapes of galaxies and the kinds of features you see in them, but combine them with spectra, right? So you have the morphology of galaxies, but their spectrum tells you see they're the spectrum actually has various different features that tells you not just about their chemical composition, but the nature of the stars that are in the galaxy. The problem is that you can take very easily images of billions of galaxies, but to take spectra, it is very difficult, it's very expensive. You have to take spectra individually or in groups of a few, and then, so you have a subset of all the galaxies for which you have images, you have spectra. How do you combine the two? How do you actually train your algorithms to learn how to classify galaxies based on both images and spectra? This is something that we are working on, and I threw this in because this is a work in progress, which we started doing with a bunch of people, collaborators I have across the world. One of them, actually, there was a student whose thesis this was, and the last author in this paper is a psychologist who actually does the same thing with EEG data on the human brain. And we found that the methods that we are observing, they are using, are exactly the same. And we put them together, and we're working on this thing where privileged learning, which is to do with the fact that you have training set on only some of the parts of the parameters that you have, but not on all the parameters, and how you can use it for the rest of the data. And I threw this in because one of the most important ingredients in doing this is the metric that is defined by the Mahalanobis distance that we use in this multidimensional space. Very, very important. Mahalanobis' work is very important in this. This classification, I'll give another important example, is becoming very important given the proliferation of data that comes. And that is in the last 10 to 20 years, we've been now finding planets around other stars. When I was a student, the only planets we knew about was in this solar system. Now we know of almost 7,000 planets around other stars, and we're discovering more every day. Now there, again, because of space-based observatories, the data for finding planets around other stars has proliferated. It's everywhere. One of the most important ways of doing this is that you are observing a star and suddenly you see a dip in its brightness. And that is because a planet has come in front of it. It's a small eclipse, a transit, right? And you don't see the planet. You see the star, but you see this dip. And you can see this dip, that as the planet comes, you don't see the planet, but you see the dip, right? So I'll give you an example. So these things. Now, if you have billions of such observations, how do you find those dips? I'll show you a very short video clip of a system which is called Kepler 90 system, which is very much like the solar system. And now we've started finding extra planets. There are 9 planets that are known in this system, just like our solar system. And many of them were discovered by machine learning methods of finding these dips. You can see that in our solar system, you got Earth, Venus, and Mercury's orbits. Kepler 90 has these orbits of different planets, very much like that. And Kepler 90I, which is the inner one, was discovered recently by a bunch of people who are working in Google, not in astronomy, but using machine learning techniques to look at all these. Just look at the amount of the light curves that come out of Kepler, which is that, and they trained their methods to find these little dips that are characteristic of planets, and they found this planet that is so close to the star, and one of the planets was found, right? So it's a very interesting example of how people are using these machine learning techniques to find planets. Here's another example of things that happens in our galaxy. Our galaxy has little satellites, just like we have the moon from the Earth. Saturn has hundreds of satellites. Our galaxy has satellites. And our galaxy grows by these satellite galaxies, small galaxies, falling into our galaxy. So people are developing these methods, automated methods. Humans can't really find these. As a satellite galaxy falls into our galaxy, it produces these streams of stars that are connected with each other. And this tells us about the history of the growth of our galaxy. And there's a new survey that is going on with another satellite telescope called Gaia, which has gone up and is making a 3-dimensional map of stars around us, of almost 1 billion stars. And there are these machine learning algorithms, essentially statistical algorithms, that are finding these streams that are remnants of galaxies that fell into our galaxy, and trying to understand how our galaxy has grown. And these are things that human eyes can never pick up. So now we are building these telescopes that are in space and all over the world that never sleep. There are networks of telescopes at all longitudes that monitor the sky 24 hours and produce this amazing amount of data. And one of the things that one needs to do is to find unusual things. And that's the third thing that I was talking about, outliers. When you have, in multidimensional space, you find things that cluster together with each other. They are similar to each other, but then you find these things that are not similar to each other. And these are outliers, and these are the most important and interesting discoveries that will lead to new things being discovered. So, for example, when neutron stars were discovered, they were like that in the 1960s. Here's an example of a citizen science problem where a school teacher in Holland actually was looking through loads and loads and loads of pictures of the sky and found things that have never been seen before and called a vorwarp. These are galaxies that have very characteristic, very weird looking structures, and now we are studying them. And these are, so now people we are now inviting citizens who are not astronomers, because there are only 10,000 astronomers in the whole world, really. And the amount of data that I'm talking about, petabyte a night, will actually need not just machine learning algorithms, but actually many people go and look at the data and make discoveries. And this is why astronomy has now gone into curating, and actually was the pioneer, astronomy was a pioneer in curating citizen science. What we are doing is we're taking all the data that's coming out of these amazing surveys and putting them on the web, free of cost, for people to look at. And any of you, even if you're not a practicing astronomer, can go in, register yourself, and pick a problem. You will be given a little training on how to classify galaxies or how to find unusual structures, find gravitational lensing, find new planets. There have been school students in India who have discovered new planets around other stars in this way, right? Galaxy Zoo, and Galaxy Zoo is a very large project. Of course, now it has now gone into many other subjects. So you know that in biology, a lot of people are monitoring migratory birds, monitoring butterflies, moths, by involving the general public. Galaxy Zoo, the Zooniverse itself has many, many, many projects, and I'd invite you to come and join. And you can start now, and you can look for planets, look for new objects in this amazing proliferation of data. And a lot of the input that the citizens are giving in are now being used to train machine learning algorithms to then look at how the data can be done. I want to end today by saying that I want to address the people who are professional statisticians and machine learning practitioners in the audience. These are some of the things that astronomy needs from you. Some of the data might come from non-technical people, but these are some of the basic problems that are now being flooded with data across the electromagnetic spectrum, and in some cases from gravitational waves and particles that are coming from the various detectors in the Earth. And one needs to make sense of all the data, put together and try to understand the universe. One of the important things that people don't understand often when people look at normal data and tools and apps that use data, that's actually very relevant for the kind of LLM-based apps that people use now, is that when physicists make measurements, they pay deep attention to uncertainties, which we call errors. Often statisticians or machine learning practitioners don't pay attention to errors because every measurement has an error associated with it. And it's very important to devise methods if one looking at the kinds of statistical exercises that I've talked about today. You have to pay attention to errors. That is not being done. That is a big, big subject that needs to be paid attention to. For example, you think something is an outlier because that does not belong to 3 clusters. But if the uncertainty in the measurement of that particular object is very large, or the uncertainty of the positions of the clusters is very large, that outlier might not be an outlier. A good example. So actually applying normal machine learning tools that you all use, statistical tools that you all use to astronomical data, but paying attention to how the data is generated is going to be one of the major issues of dealing with astronomy in the coming decades. And so we are actually at the juncture, the right juncture, where the data sets are exploding and we need your help of people who do statistics. I'll stop here. Thank you. don't know whether there is any time for questions, but I can take questions. I don't know whether there's time, but if anybody want to ask questions, people can ask questions. Okay. People can ask questions. I'm very happy to take questions. But people have to speak up. I think it's also lunchtime. You can probably hear people's stomachs rumbling more than. I'm here for this, okay. Yes, okay.
Things of this nature, the question of extraterrestrial life and the possibility of we ever getting to know them. Very recently, I was reading somewhere that the statistical probability of we ever getting to know them is very low because they will have to travel at the speed of light for several million years to even reach us. Is there anything you want to say on that?
I mean, I could talk for years on this, but of course I just 2 days ago saw Disclosure Day. If you've watched it, please go and watch the movie. The reason I showed the importance of finding planets around other stars, one of the major importance of doing that is that we know that if there is life around other stars, they would be on planets. They can't be on stars because stars themselves do not have the kinds of conditions in which you can have complex molecules. Now, till 95, nobody knew that there was another planetary system, right? So we didn't even know. So all the probabilities of the Drake equation and Carl Sagan's work was based on assuming that there are planets. Now we know almost every star we look at. So Kepler 90, there are 9 planets around it, have planets around them. And in fact, most of the stars in our galaxy are actually binary stars, double stars, more than 50%. So most planets would have 2 stars in their sky, 2 suns in their sky, Tatooine. So, so it is important to study these systems. Now, if, for example, you have stars in our galaxy that are a few light years away, that have planets that are habitable, and of course we are starting off to measure such things. ISRO has a program now of sending a satellite that will measure the atmospheres for telltale signatures of life, because there are certain molecules that we produce in our lifetime that can be found in the spectral signatures in the atmospheres. We can figure out whether such things are there, even though they might take, as you say, millions of years to come to us. If they have the technology to travel close to the speed of light, which is difficult, it is true that they will take a while to come to us. But we have been transmitting radio waves through our All India Radio and Doordarshan and TV before that for 100 years now. So 100 light years, our TV programs have reached from the Earth. If somebody can actually tune into programs and watch John Wayne movies sitting in a planet, well, within 100 light years, there are 1,000 stars, right? And they might have planets around them. So you really, actually, to make contact, you don't have to go and make contact. You can actually, you can communicate at the speed of light. I think the first communication that will happen, and I strongly believe that there are other life forms in the universe. The first communication that will happen will probably be through radio communication before you go and meet somebody in the other. But to do that, you have to figure out first. And I think we're just starting off by discovering the planets. Then we'll find out what their atmospheres look like. Then we'll find out whether the atmosphere has water or carbon dioxide or methane. Then steps. And that's why it is very exciting, extremely exciting.
Shumukh, one quick question. Yeah, when you were talking, I was also thinking about, these outliers and what the errors will, the role the errors will play in figuring out what those outliers are. My question might be a little technical. You don't have to answer this, but the observations that you guys make depends on what kind of things are happening in the universe. For example, you talked about solar storm. You might make an observation when it's subdued. You might also make another observation when there is a huge solar storm. Now, these two observations will have different kinds of error parameters or error models associated with it. My technical question is, are you also starting to model the errors depending on when the observations were taken or the system under which the observations were
Totally.
taken?
I mean, I completely agree with you. And in fact, my interest in machine learning for the last 20, 30 years has completely been to understand the errors. I don't think there's enough done. And that is because, for example, a lot of this interesting stuff happens at high energies. I showed you ultraviolet X-rays. If you're getting a quantum of amount of energy in X-rays from any object, you're actually getting a few photons. I've done myself observations of whole galaxies in the X-rays where I have counted 15 photons, right? Because they're very high energy, each one. That is the realm of Poisson statistics, not even Gauss. You can't do normal statistics with 15 photons or 10 photons. So there's a whole branch of astronomy now dealing with small number statistics, understanding the variations of the different conditions, and these are multi-parameter problems. Very, very complex systems, extremely complex systems. So the answer is we don't understand. And because astronomy is a data-driven subject, the more observations come up, the more we are inspired to solve them and develop new methods. And it's throwing up some amazing challenges. So we're in a very, very, very much at an infancy in the subject. And that is because the data is only starting to come up. You're absolutely right. We try to understand these things in terms of the terrestrial physics we know. Good example is our understanding of magnetism. Our understanding of magnetism, a lot of this is magnetohydrodynamics driven, stuff that you see on the surface of the sun, for example. And magnetohydrodynamics in very strong gravity, not well understood, right? Just an example. And then, you're looking at observations, you're looking at error models, very complicated, very interesting stuff coming up. And I don't know how many young people are here. I envy the young generation. They'll be actually doing a lot of the real complicated and interesting work. We are at a very initial stage. Interestingly, there are many subjects of which you can see that a lot of research has been done, and now people are struggling to find research problems. I think astronomy, even though people think of it as a very old subject, because of this situation where we now have so much data, has now become a very young subject. Anybody else? Yes. It depends on what you mean by quantum view. If you're talking quantum gravity, yeah. No, of course. The normal, when you're dealing with photons, when you're dealing with electromagnetic radiation, our basic formulation is quantum field theory, right? So we do understand the quantum nature of photons across the electromagnetic spectrum. What we do not understand is the quantum nature of gravity, because on very large scales, the force that matters is gravitation. And in particular, the quantum effects of gravity are not well understood. So when we ask the question of, why was this thing like this in the very early universe? Or what happens very close to a black hole or inside a black hole? These questions have to be answered using a quantum theory of gravity, and that's something that we don't understand yet. Absolutely. However, when we are looking at the electromagnetic radiation and understanding, the effects that the physical effects that produce X-rays or gamma rays or radio waves, these are very well understood, and this is, of course, very, very well documented. Anybody else? Yes. Quickly.
Can they impact normal human life?
No, not at all. Well, I mean, that's whenever I introduce myself as an astronomer to people out in the street, what 50% of them think I'm an astrologer, and I absolutely, think that that's not possible. Of course, it's a very interesting.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I can go on for ages. I'm not going to bore you now. The lunch is imminent. But astrology as a subject is very entertaining. If you ask me as a physicist, the kinds of forces that exist between objects in the universe are so faint that that they cannot really affect us. In fact, if you think that the day I was born, the position of the sun and the moon and the stars were important, I think the position of the nurse that was standing next to me or my mother was far more important, because the force that my mother exerted on me was much, much more than any star. So, no, but it makes wonderful stories, no doubt about it.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, Mr. Ravinder Kumar, Chief Executive Administration and Finance of the Institute, will present the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the ISI, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed guest, respected President ISI, Professor Shankar Kumar Pal, Chief Guest Professor Somak Rai Chaudhary, Special Guest Professor Pankar Das Gupta, respected Director Professor Amrita Kumar Datta, Dean of Studies Professor Vishu Bharta Pradhan, ISI President Sri Partha Pratim Mahanta, and media people. Thank you, sincere thanks to the ISIWO in charge of the various divisions and units of the Estate, Civil Engineering, Electrical Maintenance Unit, Audiovisual Unit, Public Relation Unit, Printing Publication Unit, Library who handled the event throughout. A wide round of applause and thanks to all the participants who made this event a memorable one. Finally, I would like to thank all of you present here for making the time to be with us today and helping us make this event a grand success. Thank you, one and all. Thank you.
All of you, please rise for the national anthem.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंधु गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंग विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्छल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मागे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगल दायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
Lunch from ISI canteen. Thank you.